Okay, well, it is 12:01, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Just as a quick reminder, if you're new to Zoom or how to use it, if you have signed in through your computer, there should be a mute unmute button in your lower left-hand corner that you can use if you need to ask a question. If you're on the phone, dialed in by a phone, you can *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And if you are dialed in, either way, just try to be on mute just so that we don't get a lot of feedback as anybody is talking. So, well, good afternoon for April 17th. I know it snowed here in Des Moines quite a few, I think 4 inches last night, and it is all already melted. So hopefully you all are back looking at a spring scene like I am and everyone's staying healthy. Today's CEO office hours are going to be a little bit different just because we don't have a set agenda of topics to go over with you today. So I'm just going to start out by going through a couple quick slides. As a reminder, my contact information for my email address, if you need it, you should also have my cell phone number, but I'll get that added for next week in case you need to reach out to me directly. I'm Michelle, by the way, just in case you don't recognize my voice by now. Brief reminder of the purpose of our office hours is just to provide an opportunity for you all as CEOs to get on and have just a dedicated space to interact with our staff and ask any questions and get any clarification that you need. And also for us to have an opportunity to reiterate any of the guidance that we've sent out or provide any additional explanations that we need to provide. We are posting the recording of the office hours along with the PowerPoint presentations on the State Workforce Development Board website, where the other CEO training session recordings are located. So I'll get this posted probably mid next week, and that will be available for you as well. The previous 2 sessions are already available on that website. And just another quick reminder, again, we can examine the timelines and review guidance and answer any questions. So just to look again at the new timeline, this information was released 2 weeks ago prior to our office hours calls on April 3rd. We have gotten some additional guidance and flexibility from the Department of Labor, allowing us to push back some of these key task deadlines because, as we know, the coronavirus epidemic and the response to that has really taken the forefront. It continues to really be at the forefront of all of the work that we're doing at Iowa Workforce Development. Right before getting on this call, I had the pleasure of telling all of my staff that they're mandated to work 16 hours of overtime this weekend to continue to facilitate processing of unemployment claims to get people the additional benefits they're eligible through the CARES Act. So that was not a very fun call, but what we're hopeful is that by the end of next week, we have a lot more people receiving those benefits and getting that financial help that they need. So I guess I can pause here and ask if there are any questions that anybody has now that they've had some additional time to process the new deadlines. Any questions surrounding this that you wanted to ask?
Yes, can these be sent out to people, this new sheet here?
Sorry, I was struggling to find my unmute button. Yeah, I've already sent this information out in an email, but I can send it out in this format if that would be helpful. So, yep, absolutely. Okay, well, if there aren't any other additional questions about this, we can move on. And again, what I wanted to just sort of stress to you today, as I mentioned at the beginning, usually we have a set list of topics, of questions that we've received and we've been providing answers to. As I just mentioned, unfortunately, I'm trying to balance my time between the unemployment stuff that's really at the forefront right now and maintaining all of the work that you all need from us to be able to do your job. So I have been working diligently with Lori and Michelle from Kentucky, as we affectionately call her, instead of Michelle from Iowa, on an RFP example and that additional guidance. So we actually were meeting for a couple of hours this morning on that as well, and we're going to finish up some pieces of that next week. So I'm hopeful that I can have that out to you. Not hopeful, I'm going to commit to that before the next office hours meeting, so hopefully probably not next week because I will need legal to take a look at it, but early the following week, I will have that new WIOA compliant RFP template available for you all. And then we can plan to spend time on the May 1st office hours calls discussing it and answering any specific questions you would have after you receive it. And then keep in mind, you can always call me directly or email me questions. You don't have to wait for the office hours calls, but that is our plan of attack and where we're at, focusing on of the guidance. So with that, I really just plan on opening it up for you all today to see if there's any questions that we can answer, or if you have any questions about the RFP that we can take down and make sure we include when we put out that guidance, we can take those questions down as well.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Jack Willie from Jackson County.
Yeah.
Last week when we talked, you talked about the possibility that you were going to have some additional information about the fiscal officer or the fiscal agent and
Yes.
Guidelines for that. Have we seen anything additional?
No, Jack, I haven't been able to do that. I'm sorry. I've been trying to get the RFP part done because I know there are several local areas that are really wanting to push and get that out. So I kind of shifted brains and focusing on that piece. And coincidentally, you can't really do an RFP without talking about fiscal agent. So part of that conversation on my end with Lori and Michelle and Lynn is putting that all together. So, and if you remember last week, I told you about our plans with Mayor and Mayor to add the fiscal agent training. So that's
yes.
Kentucky, Michelle. So we're working through that process of getting those that training up and running and getting that going. I know in your new local area that you are eager to get the funds out correctly. Miranda has communicated that to me. And so that's something that we will be working on and try to get that training to you guys as soon as possible. There's also internal training that will need to be provided. So I'm working with my team in financial management for what that looks like and outlining the steps for getting a new fiscal agent access to the systems that we use for the funding and all of that. So we're outlining all of that. And I know that that's another piece that you also need relatively quickly. So it's definitely on the to-do list. It's definitely at the forefront. It's just trying to find the time to get this all done. And I promise
I can certainly understand that, but yeah. Thank you for your information.
Yeah, it'll happen. I promise.
Can I add something to your answer though, Michelle? Sure. This is Lori.
Lori.
So it's not that it hasn't happened yet. It's that it's currently happening right now. So what we're doing at Mayor, since we brought on a person who's got a specific skill set that could be useful here, the first things that she's working on is trying to understand what are the avenues for contracting in Iowa, how that contracting mechanism will look from IWD to the fiscal agents, and then also what all has to be in place to ensure that that is done in a compliant way. So Michelle was being a little too harsh on herself just now in giving you that answer. It's not that it's not done yet. It's that we've started it, and the person that we've brought on is busy trying to get acclimated to the Iowa system, and is developing as she goes ideas and questions and things that will ultimately morph into that training. So it's underway. It's been underway for a couple of weeks. So hopefully that's Lori. A little more helpful. You're welcome. No problem.
Thanks for adding that, Lori. Any other questions we can talk about today?
This is John Bell from Cedar County, kind of following up on what Jack had to say. We are looking at staffing and procuring that staff, and of course helping our area through that process of compliance and so forth. And so as we are progressing in that, we kind of want an idea. I know we talked about it in a meeting yesterday in our area. We were talking about what kind of timeline are we looking at in hiring that staff, but that somewhat goes back to when will we have the fiscal agent. I mean, we've got who's going to be our fiscal agent. However, they kind of want to know when they're going to get the money, because they will not, float the funds for us. It's one of the counties, but they're not going to float the funds for us to hire staff, and we can't hire staff until we get that fiscal agent set up to receive that money. So we were just kind of wondering what kind of timeline we're looking at.
I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm obviously struggling with where to click today. Really not being able to find my mute button. So you raise a good point. And so one of the things that I'm trying to work with through the legal team is determining who we're able to give additional funds to. If that's to local areas that are just realigning that are eligible for the additional set aside funding that we have, or if that's something that we can extend to everybody. So I have that question out that we're determining with the legal team, and hopefully can have an answer soon. And if that's the case, then we can work forward. But as Lori mentioned, we also have to be able to have those contracts in place to get that money to you all. So that's another piece that we're working on here to make sure that we can then contract the funding out correctly. Because remember, the contracts that we've been using in Iowa for, I don't know, a couple of decades now are not compliant with the way that the structure should be. So we really have to revamp that contract completely as well. And something that we're working on and that we are working to get very quickly, because obviously we need that. That's going to be that first layer of contracting that will happen to get these funds out correctly. The other thing really, and Lori, please stop me if I say anything incorrectly, but the money that the existing local areas have, and I believe you said you were in Cedar County, which is the current region 10, I think, off the top of my head, over by Iowa City, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. They have funding that you can use for administrative purposes. And so that's a conversation that can be had as well. And a way to get you money a little bit faster than we might be able to get you any additional funding if that's available. So that's something we can also talk about and have a conversation about offline if you want to ask any, specific questions about your area. You could give me a call.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about today? One other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I actually forgot this at the beginning of the call, was I had sent you guys an email on Monday morning, I believe, that talked about additional assistance funds that are available to your local areas to help with the response to the pandemic, and the availability of $400,000 that local areas could essentially apply for to facilitate on-the-job trainings for companies that are either producing PPE or are a part of the essential supply chain or essential services in response to the coronavirus epidemic. Just didn't know if you guys had a chance to review that, if anybody had any questions, or if there was any interest from any of the local areas in pursuing that funding. If there's anything I could explain to help you be able to take advantage of it.
I guess, Michelle, my question is, Jack Willie again, for the those special additional system funds, would they have to be because of the coronavirus? We just had a company close in Makokata this week, and 105 people lost their jobs.
And that's,
it
oh,
wasn't
sorry, go ahead.
virus. It was the company just, it used to be called Specific Coast Feathers. I can't remember what the current name is, but they just announced, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, that they were closing the doors.
Okay. So, and just, I guess, a little bit of history for everybody when it comes to the dislocated worker. So anybody that's laid off from a company like that, where the company either lays off a mass chunk of people or even one person really, or they shutter their doors completely. Anybody that was working at that company that is now out of a job, it qualifies as a dislocated worker, which is one of the funding streams that we're talking about you all facilitating, right? So
Right.
realistically, each local area already has their allotment for the year to help with the dislocated workers. So the way that the system is designed to work is those formula funds that you get on a yearly basis are designed to help with those types of dislocations. But when you have really sort of any sort of event that doesn't allow the current resources to facilitate services for those dislocated workers, that's when the state can look at the additional rapid response dollars. Now, when we put out a project like this, we need to have some specific guidelines around how it's going to be used, because the law dictates that the funds are used in specific ways. So the project plan that we put out on Monday was very specific to the coronavirus epidemic response, really for twofold, because there's a lot of people who have currently lost their jobs, and also because there are a lot of companies that are hopefully ramping up production on certain things. And the way that an OJT is designed to work is to get somebody into a job that they might not have any of the skills necessary, but the business is willing to hire them and train them, and get them those new skills that they would then have long term. And also they're working while they're learning, because a lot of people cannot afford to take the time to go to school and then get a job. So it's the education and the working at the same time, right? So the $400,000 for Monday, no, because it was put out in a project plan specifically for that. But if that's the conversations that we all start having as these events happen. Now, any company that lays off, in the state of Iowa, 25 people is the minimum that requires a WARN notice, which is a notice the company's required to give the state when they're laying off more than 25 people. I have not seen that come through yet, but when we get that, what we do is we reach out to the local area and we start coordinating rapid response activities. And if there is a need for additional funding at the local level to serve those people, then that's something that we can look at providing. And one of the things that we can do, Jack, too, is if you want to, we can get on a call next week and take a look at the budget and what's available in your local area and whether they have current funds or not, or whether that's something we need to look at trying to find additional funding for.
I do know that our economic development, Nick Huckmary, and the office in Davenport, they had kind of an emergency conference call meeting about it, and for the dislocated workers. And I know they're currently working on that.
Perfect.
I just haven't been a party to that conference call. So
Yeah.
I'm just really concerned about those employees and I know that a lot of them might not be skilled in computers and that sort of stuff. So I know there's some things and some opportunities they might have, but I guess I just was curious about these additional funds, and now I know. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And the other thing that I'm also working on diligently, and I don't mean to keep beating this drum because I know you're sick of hearing it, but part of this pandemic response is not just about this immediate need of getting people their unemployment, which is literally, we're now pulling in people from the Department of Natural Resources and other state agencies and training them on unemployment and throwing them to the wolves and putting them on the phone to answer phone calls for people, which is not a pleasant thing to do if you don't know unemployment, but they're doing it. The other piece of this is the recovery phase, right? And in Iowa, that's something you can tell by watching the governor's press conferences every day that they're focusing on that immensely. And one of the opportunities that we have is to apply for additional funding from the Department of Labor to pull additional dislocated worker funds into the local area or into the state and then out to the local areas. And again, the Department of Labor is very prescriptive of how these funds have to be used. So it becomes this sort of, Lori, what are the words I'm looking for? You really have to be strategic in how you apply to use these funds, because they will put some very strict requirements on the use of those funds. So we're looking at doing some applications for dislocated worker grants for what they call industry-wide layoffs. And it would be based off of an industry sector. For example, food service and accommodation is an industry sector that would cover all of your restaurants and bars and hotels and those types of people. And obviously that's an industry sector that has been devastated by the coronavirus epidemic. So now those types of grants and funding are not specific to a pandemic such as this. As a matter of fact, they've never been used for a pandemic such as this before. Normally, we could look at a business like that, specifically, Jack, and say, there's 105 people. We don't have the amount of funds we need. We could go out and get some additional funds from the feds if they'd be willing to give it to us. Unfortunately, at a federal level right now, everything is focused on pandemic response. So that's where the strategic application and response comes in. So can we pull in some additional funding from the feds to use for the pandemic, which would free up the funds we already have to shift towards helping people that are still being laid off, but not necessarily because of the pandemic. So those are the pieces that we have to sort of move around in this puzzle and get to fit together, and then I'm working on the backside. But whenever you all have a specific instance like that you know of and you have concerns, those are things you can absolutely reach out to me about, and I can work with my team to make sure that we are able to respond in the way that we need to. So I know that was a long-winded answer, sorry.
But thank you for that information.
Yeah.
Hi,
Okay.
Michelle. This is Heather Garcia.
Yeah.
I work for the Region 11 board, and we have gotten some emails and phone calls from constituents asking about unemployment information. Will you be providing any talking points for CEOs or for board members that might receive unemployment questions?
Sorry, I was just writing that down. I don't know that that's something that has been discussed. I can talk to Deputy Director West. He has been between himself and Director Townsend, and I think also Mike, who's on the phone, handling all of the sort of inquiries and on a daily basis to groups across the state with questions like that. And I can look into something if that's something that they would be willing and want us to do. The other thing I would say is absolutely, you know, and I'm sure you've heard from these constituents that they can't get through on the phone or they're not getting email responses. You know, I would tell you that the website is a wealth of information. Everything is posted online. A lot of it is being posted in multiple languages as well. And they continue to update that. There are videos online about how to apply and for frequently asked questions and anything like that. Mike, do you have anything to add? But I mean, that's something I will look into, Heather.
Thank you.
I definitely,
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
I was just going to say definitely all those things that Michelle mentioned on our COVID-19 tab on the homepage, all of the videos, the frequently asked questions documents for employers, for individuals. It's really the place for every piece of information about the CARES Act programs and the unemployment pieces.
Can't hear Mike at all.
I think what he said, Jack, was that Michelle is fabulous and just listen to what she said. That's what he said. No, I'm just kidding.
There's no doubt about that.
That's what I heard.
He said that, yeah, the website is the best resource for everything COVID related. Obviously, the CARES Act information, it changes on a daily basis. And so it's being updated just frequently as possible, sometimes late at night even. So that would be where I would refer people. But in the meantime, I will also look into some talking points. And if there are specific questions that you're getting, Heather, that you think that those talking points should be, you know, informed around, if you want to email those to me, that would be helpful, because otherwise, you know, it's a pretty broad, that'd be a lot of talking points.
Right. Even just knowing the resources that are on the website, that's extremely helpful. I have gotten some questions from other agencies that help people that typically are on the low income spectrum. And so even just for them to know where to get additional information to help their the people they serve, that's very helpful.
Yeah. The other thing I would also point out in this day and age, the social media is a huge place to follow. The Twitter accounts, the Facebook page, and as I mentioned, Ryan West is having conference calls and hosting webinars such as this on a daily basis almost. I think was it yesterday or today, Mike? There was another one, and they are aiming those webinars towards different audiences. I think it was yesterday. That was one being aimed specifically at the people who were self-employed. And so they've been doing that very frequently, and they announce those and they put the links for how to log on to those on all of the social media accounts as well. So
Perfect.
Also,
And you know, some of the people that we do get questions from might not have access to the internet. So how you mitigate and provide support for people that don't have access to the internet, or maybe have limited minutes on their cell phone, where they're not able to wait on hold and they're also not able to email. How do we serve those people?
yeah, I will reach out to Ryan and see if I would assume this is not the first time this issue has come up, and they probably already have a solution I just don't know about. So we can check with that. Mike, do you know anything? And it is very hard to hear you, Mike, by the way.
I'm not sure what's happening with my my microphone today. Can
That's
you hear me?
better.
Okay. I'm having to put my nose to the screen. Definitely, they are working on those resources, as well as, like today, we've been doing some recorded webinars with Embark to help folks that, from the refugee population and some others. But those are great points, and we will definitely get with Ryan and make sure that we are exhausting all avenues, especially for those folks that may not have the right access or internet access or phone, for sure. He's also been doing webinars and things with pretty much every state agency to make sure that we are getting the messages out as far and as wide as we can.
Perfect. Thank you. I had a couple of questions about the rapid response funds also. Will there be admin funds associated with those rapid response funds?
Lori, help. I believe the answer is no.
No, there are no admin dollars on rapid response.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
And do the admin dollars have to be spent by June 30th?
You can roll over your admin dollars.
You can roll over the admin dollars, but the rapid response dollars, can those be rolled over?
Yes. Are you talking about the 400,000 that's being made available?
Yes.
Yeah. If they're put into contract, they'll be able to be used beyond June 30th. Yes.
Okay. Good to know. And for regions that aren't realigning, what if they need to hire board staff and they don't have any admin funds remaining? How can they hire staff? I don't mean to sound trite. I'm just wondering what the solution would be with that.
Lori, do you?
Sure. I think, Heather, that's been a question that has come up multiple times whenever we've had these conversations. And the fact of the matter is, and I'm not going to tell you anything you or anybody else on the call doesn't already know, is that was the reason there was an attempt by the state of Iowa to consolidate local areas, because there is a requirement and a need for there to be staff, and there is also not enough administrative dollars when the state is divided as much as it is. There's not enough admin dollars to accomplish that. So when a group of CEOs, along with their local board, comes to that realization, I think one of the options is going to have to be revisiting that conversation about merging local areas to ensure that there are sufficient admin dollars to accomplish all of the tasks that need to be accomplished, and keeping in mind that the tasks to be accomplished are directly aligned with what gets local areas and the local governance structure to a point of compliance. So, there's...
and this is more talking about the current budgets budgets that have already, they were set last year. And so the boards and the service providers, all the entities involved have already allocated the dollars. So if the boards are, and even for the boards that are looking to realign that don't have board support, what's a way to plan for that with the money that they do have? So this is more of a budgeting question as opposed to a realignment question.
Well, but I recognize that it's a budgeting question, but if money's not there, money's not there. But there is still the need for staff. So I mean, I think it's one of the things, and Michelle, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. One of the options may be that the chair of that local board, the Clio in that area, get on the phone with Michelle and really take a look at those budgets and begin to identify ways that it could happen. You know, I don't, there's not, I mean, and I know that you know this, Heather, there's not a simple solution to it. And I think it's going to be, it's going to take some really hard conversations by various people in order to get there. Because if a local area doesn't have staff now, and even though we're nearing the end of a contract year or nearing the end of the state fiscal year or what have you, if they don't have staff now, it's not just a problem for now, it's also a problem with the next allocation of funding, because they need to have staff. And so, you know, I realize that it appears to be a budgeting question, but it's really not as simple as that. It's an overall issue with the structure and with the amount of dollars that come into the state of Iowa, unfortunately.
Hey, Michelle and Lori, this is Barry Anderson up in Clay County, Region 3-4.
Hey, Barry.
And I understand what you're saying there. Region 3-4, it does come back to a little bit of a budgeting item, because Region 3-4 planned to allow to have a little bit of money left in our budget just in case something changed, which we were very fortunate for this. So we have some money set aside, not a lot, but it was enough to hire board support. So we have that in place. But the hard part with this is when Regions set up a budget, and then that money is allotted and spent as how those regions have done business in the past, and then things get changed partway through the year, and we just get told that, well, this is now what you have to do. Luckily, we are okay in Region 3-4, but that's a hard thing to do when those monies are totally spent.
Sure.
And then your back is against the wall. So, and it doesn't seem like there's any way to work around this. So, but again, luckily we're okay in 3-4. I feel for those and others that don't. I do have a question, and I'm with you, Michelle. I was trying to find my unmute button. I finally got it. If I could go back to a question on the fiscal agent. If I heard wrong, just tell me so. But if I heard you right, you said that if you were realigning into a new region, that then you would be okay with receiving funds. And I take it that it's going to be into the new year, July 1. But that made it sound to me like Region 3-4, who is not realigning, we are just becoming compliant, that we might not be in the right place to receive money. And I guess I question that, because if we're jumping through all these hoops to become compliant, then why would we be penalized and not be able to receive funds? Did I hear you wrong?
No, you actually, you heard me right, but thank you for saying that, because I think I was responding specifically to Region 15, who I've been communicating with separately. Sorry, 9 and 16. And so I wasn't thinking about the other situations. And so you're correct. If you all, which I know you all are, right, you have appointed a new service provider for 7-1, and you're working on the fiscal agent piece and all of that. So if any local area is in the position to have the money contracted out correctly for program year 20, we can do that for everyone. But in those local areas that are extending their existing service provider contracts and aren't quite as far along, you know, it's easier and it makes more sense for them to continue to receive their funding for at least the beginning part of PY20, the same way they have been, right? Because we're just extending their existing contract, but we're not extending your existing contract. So you would be in the same boat where we can contract it out correctly. And I apologize for making it seem as if only Region 916 could do that. And any local area that is getting to that compliant part, we will work to do that. So thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay.
Yep.
So Michelle, what would be your recommendation, back to Heather's question and even to the example that Barry gave, what would be your recommendation around that issue of needing to hire staff and trying to find or rearranging what can they do in terms with their admin dollars that they may or may not have right now in terms of being able to do that? Would you want them to reach out to you individually and you work through that with each of them that way?
Yeah, I think that, and so one of the things also, and I feel terrible, you guys, because I know I said I was going to do a couple of things and I didn't get it done. Here comes the broken record again. But one of those things was about the expenditures and showing where your local areas are existing with that admin funding and what's been expended. You know, there is a difference between what a local area has budgeted and what they've already expended. And so there is probably some flexibility there, I would say, for you to get with your service providers and sort of talk about that. Is there a way to rearrange those budgeted expenses to free up some of that admin money? Because it is technically available and not expended yet. I also understand that it has been budgeted out and there's a purpose, but I think what Lori was trying to say, or not was trying, said very well, which is why I deferred to her because I didn't want to stumble through it, is that, you know, in a local area that's budgeted $400,000, let's say, for the year, remember that that 10% or $40,000 is the maximum admin that you have. And that money is in the local areas right now. It's just been given directly to the service provider instead of through you all. But it's still there and available for you to use if you need to. It's, you know, there are some hiccups that you'd have to work through with your service providers, and we're more than willing to help that. But I also said at the beginning of the call, and I'll just remind you that there is a provision in the law that allows for, when there's redesignation, us to use some set-aside funds to give areas some additional funding. And I'm working with legal right now to figure out if that's all local areas. So, like, for example, 9 and 16, they've definitely realigned and they're working towards that. It's pretty clear we can give them some extra funding. 3, 4, you're in a different situation where you aren't realigning, quote unquote, but you're definitely working towards the compliance, which everybody else is as well. So we're trying to figure out what's correct and what's not exactly, and who we can give those additional funds to. So I will get back with the legal team. Again, broken record. Even our legal team is answering UI inbox email questions right now and is not necessarily working on some of these projects that we need to, but I'll look into that and see if I can kind of poke forward an answer, and we can move forward with that as well. But the other question then becomes, how can we contract those funds out to you? You need to have a fiscal agent. We need to be able to have that contract in place correctly. So all of these pieces have to sort of align at once, and that's what we're working to do as quickly as we possibly can.
Well, this is John Bell again from Cedar County. This is just asking for some advice. What do you do about counties that are not participating in as we're trying to go forward, we're trying to become compliant, and one of our counties, major counties, is not even at the table. I've not seen them at one of the meetings. I've not heard them call in. They seem to be ignoring it. It's just not helpful at all, and we're struggling with that. How do we get, can we get some help from you folks or some pressure or something to get them to the table?
We are more than willing to help in any way that we can, but I would also like to ask Lori to answer, just because I think you've gone through some of this stuff personally before in Kentucky, and if you have any insight you can maybe provide.
Sure. No, that's okay. I put you on the spot earlier. You're returning the favor. It's no problem. So first of all, let me say this. The reason that local elected officials such as yourselves are involved in this work is because the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act requires it. And it requires your all's involvement at a county elected official level. And it also requires, it gives financial liability, ultimate financial liability to those county elected officials, to you guys. And I know that we've talked about that till I know that a lot of you all are really tired of hearing about it. But I say that to say this part. Even if that supervisor from that county or any of the supervisors from that county are choosing not to engage with this process, it does not remove them from liability. I have heard that said on more than one occasion from representatives of the U.S. Department of Labor. So while this may seem, for whatever reason, this may seem to be on the list of things that are unimportant to address, they still have the requirement and they still ultimately have that financial liability. And so what I've seen happen, and I've even seen it happen with some of you all that are on the call today, is that as you all begin to understand and realize that financial liability piece, I'll just say that maybe it's not really that the light bulb switches on, because I know that the light bulb was already on, but it begins to make more sense why a supervisor should and could and ought to be a part of those conversations, because that supervisor or that county government is ultimately could be held responsible for those dollars. And so what I've seen happen most of the time is whenever there's a person who's not wanting to engage, oftentimes it's an education issue, and it's about their lack of understanding on what their responsibilities are, and then also what their rights are as a person that has financial liability. So my recommendation would be a couple of things. One, I think IWD could come in and help you have those conversations, but I think a lot of times, and I've seen it happen all across Iowa, it's that peer-to-peer conversation that really seems to have the biggest impact whenever it comes to this sort of thing. So I would recommend going back one more time to try to engage, and maybe it's a couple of you all from your group that attempt to engage, and then maybe it is bringing IWD in, and maybe if it's a person who didn't go through training or whatever, maybe it's about making some materials available to her or him. But I think ultimately the hook is people understanding and accepting their unit of government's financial liability in this, and why wouldn't you want to have a say in the decision making if you could ultimately have to pony up some dollars should it go that direction at some point. So
Yeah, it's frustrating because this particular county is where the provider is housed now. The provider's actually gone to that supervisor and asked if they need, what can we do to help you, with training or, they just seem to be totally disinterested and will not, we've even tried here from adjoining counties that work with them on other things. To approach them and try to encourage them, and they totally blow that off too. So it's been kind of frustrating
Sure.
from that perspective. And as we were trying to possibly merge with another region, we did not get any assistance in that, and that kind of brings up another issue, totally separate. But it's just been frustrating. And the only thing that I've said that from supervisor to supervisor that has worked for me before, and I really hate in resorting to that, is basically telling, hey, it's terrible that you don't really care for those workers in your own county, would put forth the effort to help out in the organization of this as we deal with those dislocated workers and unemployed workers and so forth. But I hate to go down that road.
Sure.
Peer pressure is never easy, but I think you hit the nail on the head that especially, when we do come out the other side of this issue right now, it is going to be a very different, I think, world and economy than what we came into it with. And the services that these programs provide are the exact kind of services that your constituents are going to need to be able to get back into the workforce and hopefully a better place than they were before. And so, using that peer pressure, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But John, if you want to call me and we can set up a time, I'm not sure if you've been working with Linda or Ronee, but we could all maybe chat and figure out. I mean, the first thing that comes to my head is just showing up at the county supervisors meeting and saying, hey, how's it going?
I have a question. Is it the particular supervisor, or is there another supervisor that you think may be able to engage? I mean,
Well, I think what happened is they had one appointed to our board and they flipped it to another one because the first one didn't want to deal with it. So the second one they got flipped to, and they don't want to deal with it either. So it's just being left on the table.
Okay. I understand. Well, and then I would also open it up to any of the other supervisors that are on the call, if there's any suggestions that they have, or,
Well, this is Jack Willie, and my comment is, I had talked to John Bell about Cedar County joining in with us. And, there was some interest in that, I think, by John, but then he would have had to get 100% of the counties that was currently in the region that he was in to agree to let them make the change.
Yeah.
And so that didn't seem like that was in the cards for John. Didn't think that would maybe work. So we didn't continue to discuss that, but that was certainly in our initial discussion, was that when we were reforming us, Region 9 and 16, Cedar County is just actually right in line with us. So we thought maybe that might be another option too, but that didn't transpire.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to that, to both of you, Jack and John, is that remember, well, everybody really, this doesn't have to be the only time that realignment happens. As we continue through this process, as we continue to become WIOA compliant across the state, it's quite possible that additional counties decide to merge together, or a county like Cedar wants to move from one to the other and can get that. So you don't have to give up on that necessarily, I guess is what I would say, right? It might not have happened just right now, but it doesn't mean it's not a possibility going forward.
Okay. We can consider that in the future, and but it's still, if they still have to have 100% of the current region say, okay, you can leave, that, that region might not want to lose the funding that Cedar County is getting.
Possibility,
And
right?
so, that would be the difficult part of it.
Yeah, we would definitely have to take care of that other issue first of just getting the cooperation and then move on. But it's not completely dead in the water, I guess I would say. There's always hope, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And to go along with that, this is Barry from Region 3-4 up in Clay County. Even if you do not realign, you still can look at joining with either a fiscal agent or board support, or with your county that is going to handle, or your service provider. So, I mean, there's ways to also share. Am I wrong on that, Michelle?
Do you mean share like the same fiscal agent across multiple local areas, or?
Right.
Yeah, you can do that. The only stipulation right now, if I will remind you guys, is that the service provider and the fiscal agent and the staff to the board cannot all be the same entity.
Right.
So that's the only stipulation. But if 3-4 wants to share a fiscal agent with, I'm trying to think who's by you guys now, 5 or whoever, that's totally acceptable. And then the only other thing I would tell you is, well, you know what, I'm not even going to mention it. There's an issue with the one-stop operator, but we're not there yet. And
Right. Yeah.
we can deal with that later. But yeah, no, you're correct.
Hi, Michelle. This is Heather again. When can we expect contracts and budgets for the next year?
You want to call DOL and ask them for me? Yeah, I have no idea. You know, typically they are sending out the T-goals that tell us what our funding levels are for the next year around now. I have seen 2 come through for some smaller programs that don't go out to the local areas, so it doesn't affect you all, but I have not seen or heard anything about when we will have that available. If you ask, they will say it's coming soon, and they do that. And I think last year we didn't get the, actually last year it was a little bit more timely, but 2 years ago it was super late. We didn't even get it till June, I don't think. So, you know, I'm hopeful that DOL recognizes the importance of these programs continuing during the situation that we're in, and they will make sure and maintain that while they're balancing all the work they're obviously doing at a federal level for the pandemic as well. So as soon as we know, we will let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Pam Jordan from Dickinson County up in Region 3-4.
Yeah.
With the counties and their fiscal liability kind of piggybacking on that, would there be any prohibition from the counties in a region ponying up some county funds to augment this transition for administration? Is there anything that would prevent that?
No.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And keep in mind as well, you know, once you guys are to that place where you're fully functioning, and Lori, again, you have to correct me when I steer off course, but oftentimes the local boards will incorporate and become a 501(c), which would allow them to then sort of start directly look at other funding opportunities that are available and gathering funding on their own, and not just through DOL and then down through Iowa Workforce Development. So there are a lot of possibilities to use other funding through the local boards and the structure that you're putting in place right now.
Okay, thanks.
Did I say anything wrong there, Lori?
Nope, you did not.
Perfect. Well, we're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour. I don't know if anybody else, I gotta say, guys, I really thought this call would be short and sweet, so I'm surprised that you're all so very engaged, and I really appreciate it. I don't know if there's any last questions anybody wants to get asked before we end today, or?
I don't have a question, but really, I really appreciate these meetings.
Thank you, Jack.
I do too. I think it's very helpful.
Great, thank you. That's great feedback, because, you know, we want to do what's helpful to you guys, and so, you know, that's great feedback, and we will absolutely continue to host these calls for, as you know, for whenever we decide we don't need them anymore, and that might not be ever, but I appreciate that, and we will definitely keep going.
So
Thank you.
one final thing, as Michelle mentioned at the top of the call, the next call 2 weeks from today, the goal for that one is to share the service provider RFP with you. It's my understanding that that RFP is not being provided to you for you to absolutely use it. It's not required that you use it, but IWD is putting it together as a template for you to use it. And we will use that call to walk through that RFP. It is going to have, it's going to be divided into two things. I probably didn't say that right, but anyway, we're going to be able to show you in the template what are the pieces and parts that really need to be included, and you know, the sections that that are just good business practice when you're writing an RFP. And I know that you all are accustomed to doing procurement at the county level, so I know a lot of that is not new to you, but for purposes of procuring a social service provider, for lack of a better word, that may be a different aspect that's new to you. So the plan is to show you the pieces and parts that you really need to have in your RFP. And then we're going to give you some optional pieces that are best practices, things you may want to consider putting in there, but are okay if you don't. So that's the approach that we're taking. I can see that call maybe lasting a little more than an hour. Not that we're going to plan for it to last more than an hour, but you all are really good about having thoughtful questions, and we get into good discussion. So I just wanted to let you all know that if you could, you may want to plan for it to last a little bit longer than an hour in a couple of weeks. And in between now and then, if you have questions about the service provider, about RFPing, about anything about procurement, send those questions to Michelle. So we'll be able to really present to you a fully informed document, and have a fully informed discussion on the issues that you all want to raise and questions you all want to get answered.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining again today. Again, I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. And if you have any other questions, obviously give me a call, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.